A janitorial cart rattled against the marble floor as Denise Atwater straightened her mop-handle eyes fixed on the gleaming lobby mirror. Across the hall, a sharply dressed executive muttered under his breath, "Don't let her near the conference room. She belongs in the basement." The words slid through the air like ice, and Denise's hand tightened around the handle. The man hadn't known she understood English, let alone 9 other languages. Her pulse thundered as he waved off a visitor with a snide smirk, then rubbed his fingers across untouched dirt on the floor as if dirt were contagious. In that charged moment, Denise chose silence, but the tension in the corridor threatened to shatter like glass. If you've ever felt underestimated or seen alone in a crowded room, drop a comment below, hit subscribe, and ring the bell because you're about to witness a story that shatters every expectation. The lobby lights gleamed under Denise Atwater's mop as Jonathan Kellerman's footsteps echoed down the corridor. He paused when he heard Mandarin clear, sharp, practiced emanate from behind the reception desk. It wasn't the usual clipped corporate phrasing. It flowed like water over stones. He half expected a translator to emerge, a member of his international sales team rehearsing scripts. Instead, a woman in a burgundy janitor's uniform leaned over a visitor's shoulder, pointing out the elevator bank with calm authority. Kellerman's breath caught. He'd been CEO of Halberg International for 7 years, traversing the globe from Berlin to Bangalore, hiring linguists, building cross-cultural workshops, yet here in his own building stood a hidden polyglot, all but invisible to him. Denise glanced up at the visitor, an older man clutching a battered briefcase, eyes wide with relief. "Take the bank on your right, then press 18, she said in flawless Mandarin. She turned switched into Spanish to guide a delivery driver, and then, without missing a beat, slid into French for a bewildered vendor assessing mislabeled boxes. Kellerman advanced, curiosity piqued and guilt gnawing at him. "Excuse me," he said, voice low enough to startle her without alarming the entire lobby. She froze mid-step, mop still in hand. Her eyes measured him, just a man in a suit, before she answered, clipped and polite. "Yes, sir." He cleared his throat. That was Mandarin, right? "Yes, sir. Spanish and French, too." He continued, watching her chin lift slightly at the recognition. You speak 9 languages." She listed them without pride. Mandarin, Spanish, French, Portuguese, German, Arabic, Italian, Swahili, plus reading Latin, each name dropping like a pebble in a silent pond. Kellerman's jaw clenched. He'd spent millions on translation services and never encountered such raw talent on his own floors. "I'm Jonathan Kellerman," he said, extending a hand. "What's your name?" "Denise Atwater." "Denise," he repeated, tasting the name. "Are you free for a few minutes?" "My office." Now, Denise's brow rose in polite surprise. "If you have the time, sir." He nodded toward the elevators. As they ascended, Denise broke the silence. "I've worked here 13 years, she said quietly. Kellerman turned, studying her profile against the mirrored walls. "I can see why you'd think that," he replied. When the doors opened on the executive floor, Denise stepped out first. The corridor smelled of polished wood and citrus, the fragrance of power, she thought. His assistant paused at the door, eyes flicking between Denise and Kellerman. No explanation was given. A nod from Kellerman was all it took. Inside the glass-walled office, sunlight poured over a world map dotted with colored pins. Espresso cups stood ready on a side table next to family photos and a dusty award from Brussels. Kellerman gestured to a chair. "Please sit." Denise perched on the edge, hands folded, gaze calm but alert. Kellerman sat behind his desk, leaning forward. "Denise, I'm going to be honest, I never expected to have this conversation. Tell me, how does someone like you end up here cleaning floors?" Her lips curved into a small, steadying smile. "You got time for the truth, sir." He nodded. She inhaled and began. Born in Toledo, Ohio, only child to working-class parents, full scholarship to Kent State in linguistics, halfway through a master's program when her mother fell ill. She returned home caring for her until cancer took her, then watched her father die of a stroke 6 months later. Denied by grief and without means, she juggled temp jobs, grocery stores, nursing homes, anything that paid. Eventually, a custodial supervisor at Halberg offered night shifts, allowing her to pick up her daughter from school and keep the lights on. "But I never stopped learning," she explained. textbooks, recordings, newspapers, in every language I could. It kept me sharp. It kept me human. Kellerman listened without interruption, the weight of her words settling into his chest. Most people never asked, she added softly. They saw the uniform and assumed. He watched her, struck by her poise. Have you ever wanted something else? A different role? She paused. Sometimes. But it's hard to dream when rent's due. A silence more charged than the lobby enveloped them. Guilt and admiration warred within Kellerman. He opened his notebook and scribbled a few lines. What are you writing? Denise asked, curiosity flickering in her eyes. Ideas, he said, closing the book. One idea in particular. Denise leaned back, watching him. He held up the notebook. Thank you for your honesty. I want to see what we can do. As Denise left the office, her mind raced. For the first time, she felt seen not as a janitor, but as a person. Back at her mop station, the hallway felt different. Whispers followed her, some envious, others supportive, but she focused on the day ahead, knowing her life was about to change forever. Each night after the last stragglers had filed out of Halberg International's gleaming lobby, Denise Atwater's world came alive in the soft hum of fluorescent lights and the distant echo of shutting doors. She pushed her janitorial cart past rows of empty chairs, the rubber wheels whispering against the polished tile. Here in these hushed hours, she felt both invisible and invincible, unseen by most, yet fully herself. The building's vast windows revealed only darkness beyond the city in slumber. But inside, Denise was awake, attentive to every smudge on glass, every dust mote drifting in a stray beam of light. She moved through the corridors like a ghost, methodical and steady. Her mop swung in graceful arcs, each sweep erasing yesterday's footprints. She replaced trash liners in boardroom bins, arranged chairs with exact precision, and wiped fingerprints from the stainless steel elevator panels. Occasionally she paused, listening to the faint thrum of air conditioning or the distant click of her own shoes. It was during these silent interludes that she rehearsed words in her head. Mandarin idioms, German declensions, Arabic script, keeping the languages she loved alive even when no one was listening. Sometimes in the stillness, Denise remembered how it felt to be noticed. She recalled standing at a podium in a crowded lecture hall at Kent State Voice, steady as she debated semantic theory classmates hanging on her every word. She remembered the thrill of discovery, reading a French novel under a tree on a sunny afternoon, losing herself in the rhythm of the language. But those chapters of her life had been torn away by illness and obligation, leaving her here navigating a different kind of darkness. By the time dawn edged its pale glow over Fort Worth's skyline, Denise had already cleaned 3 floors, restocked supplies in closets that smelled of ammonia and bleach, and swept the service corridors where maintenance crews left stray tools. She rinsed her mop in a stainless steel sink, wrung it out until no more droplets fell, then hung it to dry before slipping into her uniform's crisp burgundy jacket. Her badge clicked in at precisely 6:45 a.m. Monday mornings were her favorite. The promise of a new week felt electric even here. As she approached the lobby, the first rays of sunlight filtered through the glass facade, painting gold stripes across the marble floor. A cleaning crew from the night shift waved her on, heading to the back corridors. Their faces were tired but respectful. They knew Denise didn't waste a moment. She tucked her hair behind her ears, smoothed the creases in her uniform, and readied her mop as the building began to stir. Footsteps, sharp, decisive, echoed down the entrance hall moments later. The automatic doors slid open, and the first attorneys, consultants, and executives drifted in their heels, clicking like metronomes. Phones buzzed to life. Coffee cups passed between gloved hands, and the scent of fresh brew mingled with the faint antiseptic tang of cleaning supplies. Denise watched from a discreet distance, nodding to the security guard who tipped his cap in greeting. No one else did. She began her morning routine, a silent choreography of sweeping, dusting, and polishing. But beneath the surface, she tuned into every conversation, every snippet of foreign accent, every frustrated question from a lost visitor. She recognized a Spanish "Donde está la oficina?" from 2 floors up and memorized the typical path to conference room C. She cataloged the languages. She overheard Russian, Japanese, Portuguese, stashing them away like precious coins. Then, just as she finished arranging the last of the coffee stirs, it happened. A voice rich and fluid sliced through the lobby's morning murmur, cleaving through the rhythm of heels and the chatter of deadlines. Denise barely glanced up. She knew exactly who needed help. An elderly gentleman, his navy jacket too large for his frame, hovered at the directory touch-screen fingers, trembling as he tapped unfamiliar characters. His confusion hung in the air. Denise approached without hesitation. She crouched to his level, her mop handle resting against her hip, and offered a gentle smile. "Ni hao," she said, her tone warm and precise. The man's eyes widened, startled by the sudden recognition of Mandarin. He let out a relieved sigh, shoulders relaxing as she guided him through the menu. "Press the button on the right, then swipe down to find Executive Suite," she instructed, each word rolling off her tongue like silk. He nodded, grateful, and Denise stayed with him until the elevator doors opened. Only then did she step back, her face composed as the man chattered his thanks in halting English. But the impact of her voice stretched beyond that one interaction. Across the lobby near the revolving doors, Jonathan Kellerman had halted in mid-stride. He watched Denise with narrowed eyes, his practiced CEO's gaze taking in her uniform, her poised posture, her effortless command of a language he'd only ever heard in boardrooms and video calls. Confusion, curiosity, and something else, guilt, flickered across his expression. Denise didn't look up. She finished wiping down the directory screen, then turned on her heel and retrieved a bundle of fresh towels from her cart. She tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear, then continued her rounds as if nothing extraordinary had occurred. But the lobby felt different now, charged with the aftermath of her quiet intervention. Behind her, Kellerman took a hesitant step forward, then paused as a group of young associates swept past, discussing quarterly targets. He hesitated, torn between the urgency of his schedule and the pull of unanswered questions. Denise's silhouette moved through the crowd with practiced ease, her uniform a blur of burgundy against gray suits. He realized he had never even known her name. The next minute felt suspended in time. Jets of steam hissed from a coffee machine as Denise refilled a paper cup. The hum of conversation resumed, but in the back of Kellerman's mind her words echoed. He wondered how many times she had guided lost visitors, smoothed cultural wrinkles, or quietly bridged misunderstandings without anyone noticing. He thought of the millions his company spent on consultants and translators each year, and the wealth of talent that had been under his nose all along. Denise straightened the last stack of brochures on the welcome desk and pushed her cart toward the side hallway. As she passed beneath the lobby's central skylight, a beam of sunlight caught the edges of her mop handle, turning it into something almost regal. She paused for a fraction of a second, glancing over her shoulder as if sensing someone's gaze, but Kellerman had slipped away, swallowed by the morning rush. The moment dissolved. Phones buzzed louder, heels clicked faster, and Denise navigated through it all silent and unseen. Yet she carried a quiet confidence, now one born of knowing her own worth, even when the rest of the world ignored it. She folded her hands around the mop handle and inhaled the mixture of citrus polish and morning air. She was exactly where she needed to be, unseen in plain sight, ready for whatever came next. Jonathan Kellerman stepped off the elevator onto the 18th floor, briefcase in hand. Mind already racing through the morning's agenda, a quick catch-up with finance, a strategy call with Tokyo, then lunch with the board's audit committee. The hallway was silent, except for the soft hum of the climate control and his own measured footsteps. He paused in front of the touchscreen directory, thumb hovering over the glass, when a sound stopped him cold. It was Mandarin, precise, musical, utterly out of place in these polished corridors. He looked up, scanning the lobby below through the glass walls. The marble floor glittered in the morning light, and the reception desk was ringed by suits and ties, smartphones pressed to ears. But the speaker wasn't one of them. A woman knelt beside the touchscreen, her burgundy janitor's jacket creased at the elbows where she'd worn her mop harness. Her back was to him, mop leaning upright against the desk, a mop bucket on wheels parked at her side. Beside her stood a tall, elderly man, elbows tucked tight, confusion creased in his brow. She spoke slowly, patiently, each word rolling from her lips with the confidence and clarity of someone used to addressing a boardroom. Kellerman blinked. He expected to see one of the international sales team. Maybe Claire from Shanghai, recently flown in for a product launch. He imagined her in a tailored suit, hair pressed smooth, gesturing crisply. Instead, there was Denise Atwater, the janitor he passed every night, the woman whose face he barely registered in hallways, thick with mirrors and ambition. Something tightened in his chest, a tug of shame that he hadn't noticed her sooner mixed with awe at the sound of her voice. He watched as she guided the visitor's finger over the touchscreen, demonstrating how to scroll through the directory entries. He could almost see the relief bloom across the man's face when she said, "Press this icon here. Elevator A will take you to the executive suites." He took a step down the hall, then another, until the reflective glass blurred the lines between insider and outsider. The man turned to her and chuckled softly in Mandarin, then gestured with a nod that seemed equal parts gratitude and amazement. Denise responded with a small smile, flicking a stray twist of hair from her temple before pivoting on her heel and catching sight of a delivery man wheeling a crate of toner into the mailroom. Without missing a beat, she switched to Spanish and directed him toward the loading dock, pointing with an ease that suggested she'd done it 100 times. Kellerman's eyes widened. He remembered the global logistics conferences he'd chaired, the teams of professional translators he'd hired, the maintenance of glossaries and term bases. He lived for these moments, bridging cultures, smoothing friction, unlocking markets. Yet here in his own lobby was a woman who spoke 9 languages, and he'd never so much as paused to learn her name. A cold prick of guilt spread across his skin. He realized he'd built an empire on finding and celebrating talent, except when it walked by in overalls and rubber-soled shoes. He could almost hear the whispered judgments of his own policies: diversity initiative, talent pipeline, uncapped potential. All the strategic slides on leadership development danced in his mind, a choreography of good intentions. And here she stood, uncelebrated and unseen, crafting connections without fanfare or budget line. A memory flickered last quarter's off-site retreat in Lisbon, where he'd invited a panel of language experts to discuss global empathy. He'd sat on stage wearing a crisp suit, extolling the need to listen to voices from every corner of the world. But he hadn't listened to the voice that was echoing through his own building. The coffee cup in his hand trembled slightly as he set it down on the directory's edge. An accidental gesture, but he didn't flinch when the porcelain clinked against the glass. Denise had finished with the delivery man and was now straightening brochures on the reception counter. Her posture relaxed, her focus unwavering. The lobby's visitors paid her little heed. She was background scenery in an office movie with too many extras. Kellerman's gaze sharpened. He realized that every board report and every keynote address had skirted around this truth. Brilliance does not always wear a binder or sit at a desk. Sometimes it carries a mop. Sometimes it chooses to remain silent until the right moment. And in that moment, she became an abrupt interruption to his well-rehearsed world. He moved closer, navigating through clusters of linen-clad cleaning carts and startled interns clutching portfolios. He felt like an intruder in a secret ceremony drawn towards a presence he'd systematically ignored. The hush of corporate efficiency crackled around him as he drew abreast of her station. Denise looked up at him, brow furrowed as though wondering whether he needed assistance. She didn't know the question stirring behind his composed mask. How many opportunities had he missed? How many other Denise Atwaters were silently sustaining his empire? He realized with the clarity of a lifetime's misstep that every polished surface she cleaned was a mirror reflecting his own oversight. "Excuse me," he said, voice low and a touch awed. She paused, mop in midair, and turned to face him fully. Her eyes narrowed in polite surprise, the mop handle nestling against her shoulder as she shifted weight onto one hip. The lobby's buzz dimmed at the edges of his awareness. He heard only the beat of his own heart. "Yes, sir?" That was Mandarin, right? His words came carefully, as if he were stepping onto thin ice. She inclined her head. "Yes, sir." He exhaled slowly. "Spanish and French, too. And if I'm not mistaken, Portuguese and German." He watched her face, searching for pride, irritation, any sign that he'd startled her. Instead, she met his gaze evenly. She nodded once. "Arabic, Italian, Swahili. I read Latin, but that doesn't count." Kellerman swallowed. The flood of admiration and remorse rattled his chest like thunder. He recalled boardroom slides on unlocking internal talent and diversity quotas that had never stirred this deep a conviction. Here was a walking United Nations in uniform, and he had passed her like a shadow. "I'm Jonathan Kellerman," he said, extending a hand. There was something awkward yet earnest in the gesture, not a CEO bossing a subordinate, but a man recognizing another. What's your name, Denise Atwater? He repeated her name softly as though savoring its syllables. Denise, may I speak with you? In my office, if you have a moment. She glanced down at the mop, then back at him, eyes guarded. He could almost feel the protective shell she'd built over years of being unseen. Now she asked. He nodded. Yes. I would like to talk. For a fraction of a second, Denise hesitated. Then her shoulders squared, and she tucked a loose twist behind her ear. All right, she said. He motioned toward the elevator. As they stepped inside, her nervousness flickered faintly, a subtle shift in posture, a quick intake of breath before she composed herself again. Kellerman pressed the button for the executive floor, then turned to her. I've walked these halls for decades, he began, and I've never seen you do anything but clean. Today, I saw something else entirely. She looked out at the polished walls as the elevator rose, sunlight catching the edges of the ceiling panels. He could hear the faint clink of her mop bucket wheels shifting on the floor below. The doors opened. She stepped out first, her movement smooth despite the unfamiliar role she was stepping into. Kellerman followed, suitcase in hand, as they walked side by side down the hallway, a CEO and a janitor equal in that moment, under the same fluorescent lights, both poised on the brink of a conversation that would change everything. Jonathan Kellerman stood in the soft glow of the lobby's central chandelier, the marble floor beneath him impossibly smooth and cold. He watched Denise Atwater straighten her mop handle, her fingers brushing over the worn grip as if it were an extension of herself. All around them, the lobby buzzed with the morning rush phones, ringing, heels clicking, coffee hissing into mugs, but in that moment it felt as if time had stilled, holding its breath. Excuse me, he said, his voice low but firm. Denise turned without a flicker of surprise, her posture poised, mop resting lightly at her side. The everyday rhythm of her work continued around them, but Kellerman sensed an undercurrent of something extraordinary. He suppressed a surge of embarrassment for never having noticed her beyond the uniform she wore. That was Mandarin. He began softening his tone as he stepped closer. And Spanish and French. He watched her eyes flick up then down, registering each language as though it were an unexpected puzzle piece sliding into place. She nodded, her expression calm, and he realized he could no longer speak as if she were invisible. Portuguese, she added, her voice steady. German, Arabic, Italian, Swahili. She paused, then offered a nearly imperceptible shrug. I read Latin. I don't really count that. Kellerman felt his jaw clench. Shame and wonder warred inside him. Shame for overlooking her all these years, wonder at the breadth of her knowledge. The languages spanned continents and histories, yet she spoke them with the ease of someone flipping a switch. He swallowed, thinking of the millions his company poured into translation services, of the high-priced consultants flown in for board meetings. And here before him stood a human bridge across cultures, dusting the corners of his lobby. I'm sorry, he said, voice cracking slightly. I should have noticed before. I'm Jonathan Kellerman. Denise's eyes met his, steady and curious. She straightened from her crouch and extended a hand. Mop handle bumping her elbow. Denise Atwater, she replied. Her grip was firm, calloused from years of work, but there was a quiet strength in it that belied any assumptions one might make about her role. He nodded, clearing his throat. Denise, could you spare a moment? I'd like to talk with you. In my office, her brow lifted, a hint of hesitation flickering in her gaze. He sensed the reflexive caution she carried, the unspoken habit of being overlooked, dismissed, underestimated. But beneath it lay something else, a flicker of resolve. All right, she said, voice even. If you have the time. Kellerman motioned toward the elevators, and together they walked through the swirl of suits and briefcases. He noticed the looks they drew, some puzzled, some amused, most indignant at the idea of a janitor being summoned like an executive. Denise strode on, unfazed, mop trailing behind her like a comet's tail. Inside his office, the contrast was stark. Floor-to-ceiling windows spilled sunlight over a sleek desk, leather chairs, and a world map dotted with colored pins. The air smelled faintly of citrus polish and expensive coffee. Denise paused at the threshold, hands clasped behind her back, her uniform echoing a lifetime of hard work. Please sit, Kellerman said, gesturing to a chair opposite his desk. She settled into it with careful grace, folding her hands in her lap. He closed the door and crossed to stand beside her, leaning forward on the edge of his desk. Denise, He began. I've spent my career seeking out talent-building teams that can speak every language, navigate every market. I've given speeches about listening, about empathy, about the power of communication. And until a few minutes ago, I never realized the greatest linguist in this building was here all along. Denise's lips curved into a faint, rueful smile. She glanced down at her badge, then back up at him. Most people don't look past my uniform, she said. It's easier to assume what you see. He ran a hand through his hair, feeling the weight of her words settle over him like dust. Tell me how you learned all of this, he said quietly. How did you master so many languages while working here? For a moment, Denise's gaze drifted to the city skyline beyond the glass. She inhaled as though drawing on years of stored-up resolve. I didn't stop after college, she said. I studied linguistics on scholarship at Kent State. I was halfway through a master's degree when my mother fell ill. I came home to care for her. 6 months later, she was gone. Then my father passed. I had a daughter, no partner, no savings. I worked temp jobs, grocery stores, nursing homes. Eventually, a custodial supervisor at Halberg offered me night shifts so I could pick up my daughter from school. That's how I got here. He listened each word carving its own space in his mind. He thought of his own childhood of boarding school comforts and lunchroom whispers. He thought of company retreats and catered banquets, and how he'd never considered the sacrifices someone like Denise had made to hold space for her dreams. He realized how easy it was to champion talent on a PowerPoint slide, and how rare it was to recognize it in the person polishing the table. I kept learning, she continued. Textbooks, recordings, newspapers. Whenever I had an hour, I'd switch from scrubbing floors to conjugating verbs. It was the one part of my life that felt like mine, like I still mattered beyond bills and babysitters. Kellerman felt a lump form in his throat. Denise, he said, soft. I had no idea. She shook her head, eyes glistening. You asked? She replied. That's why I told you. He stood abruptly and walked to the world map, his back to her. He traced a pin in Sao Paulo, another in Nairobi, another in Shanghai. How many meetings have I sat through thinking we were making progress only to realize we were lost in translation? All this time, the answer was right here. He spun around and faced her resolve bright in his eyes. Denise, I want you to know how profoundly impressed I am. I want to tap into your expertise. But first, I need to make this right. She leaned forward, curiosity mixing with caution. What do you mean? He knelt before her chair, balancing his briefcase on the floor. I want to create a role for you, a position that reflects what you've already been doing, bridging cultures, guiding clients, solving problems before they even know they exist. I don't care about your lack of a degree or a certificate. I care about your skill, your dedication, and the value you bring. I'm asking you to join me at the leadership table. Denise's breath caught. The office seemed to tilt the world outside, fading to a blur of light. She glanced at her mop, half expecting to wake from a dream where a CEO invited her to sit as an equal. She thought of her daughter, of the nights spent studying by dim hallway lights, of the years of silent perseverance. She began, voice unsteady. She shook her head, blinking rapidly. I don't know what to say. Say you'll consider it, Kellerman urged, offering a gentle smile. Say you'll let me help you step into the role you deserve. Tears threatened in the corners of Denise's eyes, but she blinked them away, lifting her chin. All right, she said, voice firm. Let's see what we can do. He rose, extending his hand again, this time in partnership rather than apology. She took it, her grip strong and sure. In that moment, the gulf between CEO and janitor shrank to nothing. They stood together, two people rewriting their place in the world, united by a simple truth: talent can't be contained by a uniform. Denise settled back into the plush leather chair, her fingers tracing the grain of the armrest as if seeking steady footing in this unfamiliar world of sunlight and polished glass. Jonathan Kellerman watched her leaning against his desk with an expression that shifted from curiosity to quiet respect. The hum of the city outside felt distant. This moment belonged to her. She inhaled slowly, shoulders straightening. I was born in Toledo, Ohio, she began, voice soft but unwavering. My dad was a pipe fitter. My mom, a nurse's aide. They didn't have much, but they believed in education the way other people believe in Sunday church. From the day I could read, they pushed me toward books. She paused, remembering the evenings spent huddled around a kitchen table under the weak glow of a single bulb, rehearsing vocabulary lists instead of playing outside. I earned a full scholarship to Kent State in linguistics. I thought I was on the fast track, a bachelor's, then a master's. Her eyes flicked to the framed photo of Kellerman's daughters on his desk. That was before my mom got sick. Cancer. It hit us like a freight train. I dropped out of my master's program halfway through to take care of her. 6 months later, she was gone. Her throat tightened. She swallowed, pressing her lips together, then continued. Not long after my father had a stroke. There I was, 24 years old, no one left but me and a baby girl who needed a mother. Kellerman moved to stand beside her, not intruding but offering silent support. Denise's knuckles whitened as she gripped the armrest. I had no partner, no savings. Just student loans stacking up like bricks. I took temp jobs, grocery stores, nursing homes. Anything that paid enough to keep the lights on. Her voice wavered on the word, anything. The memory of long nights and cold floors pulsing behind her eyes. Then I found my way here, she said, a ghost of a smile passing across her face. A custodial supervisor offered me night hours so I could pick up my daughter from school. It was a lifeline. She glanced at her watch, though she knew the time didn't matter here. Cleaning rooms, emptying trash. I did it all. Every night I'd finish my shift, tuck my daughter into bed over the phone, and then I'd pull out my textbooks. Mandarin grammar, Spanish phonetics, French literature. Her gaze drifted to the world map pins, and she whispered, "Those books were my proof that I still mattered outside of diapers and deadlines." Kellerman nodded, absorbing each word. He thought of his own daughter's ballet recitals, of boardroom presentations he'd dreaded, and couldn't imagine the weight Denise carried. "You never let go of your dreams," he said gently. "Even when the world told you to move on." She shook her head. "It wasn't a dream. It was my lifeline. Languages weren't about prestige. They were the only thing that felt like hope. Every phrase I learned was a promise to myself that one day I'd use these skills for more than fixing conference tables." The afternoon sun slanted through the window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. Denise closed her eyes for a moment, as if savoring a memory. "There were nights I skipped dinner so I could study. Days I let deadlines at Halberg slip because I was lost in verb conjugations. People told me I was chasing ghosts, that I should focus on my job, on my daughter. But every time I thought about giving up, I'd remember my mother's words, 'Education is the currency no one can steal.'" Her eyes opened, and she met Kellerman's gaze directly. "I didn't stop learning when life changed. I pressed on because I had to believe there was more for me than mop buckets and shadows." He straightened, stepping around the desk to stand in front of her. "Denise, I can't begin to tell you how moved I am. You carried all of that, and still here you are performing miracles in 9 languages without anyone noticing." His voice cracked with emotion he rarely displayed. "You've taught me something important today." She offered a tentative smile, uncertainty flickering across her face. "I'm not sharing this for pity," she said softly. "I wanted you to understand why I didn't stop. I wanted you to see that what looks like a uniform can hide a lifetime of sacrifice and skill." Kellerman nodded, the weight of her story settling into his chest like a stone. "You've more than earned the right to sit at our table," he said firmly. "I want to create a role that reflects your experience, one that doesn't erase your past but builds on it. Lived experience like yours is rare." Denise's breath caught. She felt the pulse of possibility, tempered by a caution born of years of being overlooked. I want to help," she whispered, "but I need to know it's real." He held her gaze. "It is. This company will never look the same once you begin. You've already changed my perspective." A silence fell between them, not of awkwardness, but of profound connection. Outside, the city's rhythms resumed the distant honk of car horns, the hum of morning traffic. But inside that office, 2 lives had intersected in a way that would ripple far beyond the polished floors. Denise rose, folding her hands in front of her. "Thank you for listening," she said, voice steady. "Thank you for seeing me." Kellerman offered his hand, and when she took it, it was more than a handshake. It was an acknowledgement of fear and triumph, of past sacrifices and future promise. They stood together for a moment, the map behind them symbolizing the vast horizons Denise had already crossed in her mind, and those she would explore in her new journey. No one else in the building could hear their conversation now, but the impact would be felt in every boardroom and every hidden corner where talent waited to be discovered. When Denise finally left the office, she carried with her the weight of her past and the lightness of new beginnings. Each step down the hallway felt purposeful, as if the tiles themselves recognized her worth. And in the quiet aftermath, Kellerman watched her go silently, vowing that no one else in his company would ever be as unseen as she had been. The afternoon light slants through the lobby's curved windows as an anxious hush settles over Conference Room 4C. A team of 4 Brazilian executives stands clustered near the door, their polished shoes tapping against the carpet eyes, darting between the clock and the empty seat at the head of the table. Jonathan Kellerman arrives moments later, briefcase in hand, a tight smile masking his frustration. Their interpreter is called out sick, he explains quietly, forcing himself to maintain composure. He offers apologies in Portuguese, but the tilt of his head and the slight furrow between his brows betray his concern. This meeting was supposed to be critical for the Brazil expansion, and without a translator, everything risks unraveling. He turns, scanning the room for a solution. That's when he remembers Denise Atwater standing in his peripheral vision only hours before Mop Bucket parked in the corner of the lobby. He recalls the crisp precision of her Portuguese, how she guided a delivery man to the loading dock without hesitating. He sees her now, framed by the window at the corridor's end, her uniform still deep burgundy against the pale walls. Without waiting to think, Kellerman steps out of the room and calls her name. Denise glances up from where she's straightening brochure racks in the hall, the mop leaning unobtrusively beside her cart. For a moment she looks uncertain, as if any request from the executive suite is akin to a summons from another world. Then understanding dawns in her eyes. She nods and follows him through the double doors of the conference room. Heads swivel as Denise enters, mop still in hand, a curious mix of surprise and skepticism on the Brazilians' faces. She moves down the length of the table, the wheels of her cart clicking softly, and Kellerman clears his throat. "Denise," he says, "could you help us with Portuguese, please?" Their guest from Sao Paulo arches an eyebrow but offers a polite smile. "Você fala português fluent?" he asks in European accented Portuguese, searching her for any hint of uncertainty. Denise inclines her head and replies, "Sim claro," with a warmth that bridges the Atlantic accent difference in an instant. The room exhales. Kellerman slides into the chair beside her, relief mingling with newfound pride. He watches as Denise takes charge, standing at the head of the table, jostling a few chairs aside to clear space for herself. She folds her hands and addresses the delegation in flawless Brazilian Portuguese, her tone respectful yet confident. "Bom dia, senhores. Lamento o inconveniente, mas vamos aproveitar ao máximo nosso tempo juntos." "Good morning, gentlemen. I apologize for the inconvenience, but let's make the most of our time together." The executives exchange pleased nods. One tall man, his gray-streaked hair immaculate, leans forward. "Muito obrigado," he says. Denise responds, "É prazer recebê-los aqui." "It's a pleasure to welcome you here," then effortlessly shifts into English, relaying the man's gratitude to Kellerman as if she's been by his side for years. Every word flows like water over a riverbed without pause or hesitation. As Kellerman settles into the second chair, Denise begins the briefing. She outlines the agenda in Portuguese, highlighting the proposed timeline for the Rio de Janeiro warehouse launch, the logistics of customs clearance, and the projected ROI. When a delegate interrupts with a question about port tariffs, Denise doesn't just translate. She clarifies cultural nuances, explaining how certain terms in the Brazilian context carry different connotations. She punctuates her points with light humor, a well-timed joke about the notoriously slow bureaucracy drawing a ripple of laughter, and the stiff formality in the room dissolves. Kellerman leans back, watching the shift. He notes how the visitors lean forward in their seats, eyes trained on Denise, as though she holds the key to unlocking every puzzle they've wrestled with for months. Their tense shoulders relax, smiles flicker around the room. When one of them hesitates, searching for the right phrase, Denise supplies it, her pronunciation precise, her tone encouraging. The delegates respond in kind, volleying Portuguese phrases back and forth, as if they're swapping friendly barbs over coffee in Sao Paulo. At one point, the senior executive glances at Kellerman and murmurs, Where did you find this talent in English? Kellerman catches his gaze and shrugs, a tight grin forming on his lips. Right under our noses, he replies softly, letting the statement echo in the air. Denise gives him a quick, knowing smile, but remains focused on her audience, seamlessly translating Kellerman's strategy points into Portuguese and weaving in subtle cultural insights how to position the brand in Brazil's competitive consumer market, which regional partners to prioritize even appropriate small talk cues to deepen relationships. The meeting stretches on for nearly an hour. Each time a complex legal clause surfaces, Denise doesn't hesitate. She unpacks jargon referencing Brazilian labor laws, customs regulations, and even local colloquialisms that help the delegates feel understood. When they hit a snag over distribution rights, she negotiates tone and wording, crafting phrasing that satisfies legal rigor while preserving goodwill. In every moment, her fluency and cultural fluency turn obstacles into opportunities. When the final slide rolls onto the screen, Denise addresses them one last time in Portuguese, Estou confiante de que essa parceria nos levará a sucesso mútuo. I am confident this partnership will lead us to mutual success. She pauses, eyes sweeping the room as applause breaks out. The delegates clap, some rising to their feet, pacing around the table to shake her hand. Kellerman watches the scene, his chest tight with pride and conviction. The tallest executive approaches Denise first, placing a hand over his heart in gratitude. Obrigada, he says, his voice hushed. You have no idea how much this means to us. Denise simply nods and says, Você merece todo o apoio. You deserve all the support. It's the perfect blend of eloquence and empathy. Kellerman stands then, stepping behind Denise with a broad smile. Ladies and gentlemen, he says in English, addressing both his team and the Brazilians, Denise Atwater has just demonstrated why she's the perfect bridge between Halberg International and our global partners. Let's give her another round of applause. The room erupts again, this time mixed with cheers and whoops. Denise's cheeks flush, but she stands tall, accepting the acclaim with the modest grace that has come to define her. As the guests gather their materials and exchange farewell handshakes, Kellerman leans in. Denise, he whispers, that was incredible. Absolutely incredible. Her eyes meet his, a flicker of something relief, gratitude, perhaps even triumph passing between them. I just did what needed to be done, she says quietly. But thank you. He nods, clapping her shoulder gently. No, Denise, you did far more than that. You saved this partnership, you saved the meeting, and you've shown all of us what real talent looks like. She offers a tentative smile and gathers her mop bucket and cart, but Kellerman stops her. Not yet, he says. Come with me. He leads her to a smaller breakout room where his assistant has prepared a fresh pot of coffee and a tray of espresso cups. He pours a cup for Denise and one for himself, gesturing to the chairs. They sit facing one another. The hum of the building resumed outside the glass walls, but here it feels quiet, intimate, just two people acknowledging a pivotal moment. Today proved something important, Kellerman says, stirring his coffee absent-mindedly. I've seen executives come and go, watched presentations crafted over weeks, heard the best translators in the business. But nothing compares to what you just did. You connected us heart to heart, mind to mind, with people halfway across the world. Denise sips her coffee, eyes thoughtful. Language is more than words, she replies. It's trust. It's respect. It's seeing someone as more than a contract or a target metric. He leans forward, voice earnest. I want you to know there's a place for you here, one that acknowledges not just your skills, but your story, your sacrifices, your perspective. I see you, Denise, and I want the whole company to see you too. Her gaze drops to her plate for a moment, and she lifts it back up. Thank you, Jonathan, she says. That means everything. He stands, offering his hand. She takes it, the gesture now familiar but charged with new significance. Let's get back out there, he says. We've got a partnership to solidify and a company to transform. Together, they exit the breakout room and return to the main hallway. Denise grips her coffee cup in one hand and the mop handle in the other, a tangible reminder of where she's been and the path ahead. Kellerman walks beside her briefcase, swinging at his side, his expression a mix of determination and gratitude. The future of Halberg International and Denise's future shines brighter than any conference room light. Denise's badge chimed softly at 7:45 the next morning as she swiped in at the lobby turnstile. She expected the usual routine mop in hand, cart in tow, nods from security, the familiar hum of morning, yet the moment felt charged like the calm before a storm. She moved through the glass doors and stood at the elevator bank mop bucket behind her, an uniform crisp, but her mind raced with questions. After yesterday's surprise meeting and the Sao Paulo delegation's success, she wasn't sure what to expect. The elevator arrived with a soft ping and the doors slid open. She stepped inside, pressing the button for the executive floor almost on autopilot, her heart fluttering. No one else was in the lift, but she sensed the weight of every floor passing beneath them. Denise closed her eyes for a moment, steadying herself. When the doors opened on the 18th floor, the scent of leather chairs and polished wood greeted her, an aroma she was growing to associate with possibility rather than privilege. She paused outside Jonathan Kellerman's office, adjusting the strap of her badge and tucking a stray twist of hair behind her ear. Yesterday's breakthrough still echoed in her mind, a janitor translating complex contracts, diffusing tension, building bridges. Now she was about to see what came next. Taking a deep breath, she tapped lightly on the glass door. "Come in," Kellerman's voice called from behind his desk. He looked up as she entered, his expression unreadable for a moment before warmth and purpose settled in his eyes. He motioned her to a chair opposite his sleek desk, yet Denise hesitated at the threshold. Mop bucket rails still echoing on the glossy floor. "Kellerman?" she said softly, offering a tentative smile. He stood and crossed the room, setting a steaming cup of coffee before her. It steamed, curling like promise in the cool morning air. She accepted it gratefully, the warmth seeping into her palms. "Thank you," she murmured, lifting the mug to her lips. The rich aroma grounded her. He sank into his leather chair, steepling his fingers. "First, let me say again how impressed I am with you," he began. His words were measured, sincere. "What you did yesterday was extraordinary. You handled a critical meeting in 3 languages, addressed cultural nuances with ease, and built trust faster than any consultant I've ever hired." Denise set her cup down, looking out the window at the city waking below. "I just did my job," she said quietly. "I helped where I could." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Those were still focused on her. Denise, it was more than helping. It was leadership. It was diplomacy. It was exactly what this company needs if we want to grow authentically in global markets. She met his gaze now, curiosity blooming. "Sir," he leaned forward, the world map behind him, catching the sun's rays. "I want to create a new position for you, one that recognizes the unique blend of skills and experience you bring. I'm calling it Cultural Liaison for International Affairs." Denise blinked. The words echoed in her mind like a melody she couldn't yet place. A liaison, she repeated, voice soft. He nodded, eyes bright. "Yes, you'll be the bridge between Halberg International and our global partners, clients, vendors, regulators, anyone who needs more than just a translator. Your lived experience, your ability to navigate cultures, your fluency in 9 languages, those qualities speak louder than any degree or certification." Her heart pounded. She thought of her years at Kent State, the half-finished master's program, the textbooks stacked in dusty corners of her home. All that effort, all those nights studying by hall light. And here in this moment, a CEO was laying aside institutional requirements, degree certificate, pedigree, in favor of what she had actually done. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes. She swallowed, steadying herself. I don't know what to say," she whispered. He rose and crossed to her side, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to decide right this second," he said gently. "I know it's a lot to process, but I want you to know that I've cleared the way. Human Resources is on standby to draft the role description, adjust your title, set up the access you'll need. I want this to be official and immediate if that's what you choose." Denise lifted her gaze, meeting his eyes through a veil of gratitude. "Jonathan, this is more than I ever imagined. You're offering me a seat at the table." He smiled, a quiet pride in his expression. "No one deserves that seat more than you. You've earned it 10 times over." He paused, then added, "And I want you to help shape the role. What responsibilities matter most to you? How can we structure this so it leverages your strengths and still allows you to balance your life outside the office?" Her mind raced through possibilities. She thought of workshops she could lead on cultural etiquette, mentorship programs for non-desk staff, language courses for internal teams, ideas that could springboard from her lived experience. She remembered the fear she'd felt standing in the lobby, wiping tables in silence. Now, just hours later, she was envisioning leading seminars, consulting on global strategy, mentoring interns. I have some ideas, she said, voice gaining strength. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small notebook, its cover worn and dog-eared from years of use. Flipping through, she found a few pages of notes she'd jotted in quiet lobby corners. Internal language workshops, cultural empathy training, shadowing program for non-executive staff. She cleared her throat. I'd like to pilot a mentoring initiative, call it Voice Inside, to identify hidden talent across all departments, and perhaps a monthly language lab where teams can practice basic phrases and learn cultural insights relevant to our markets. Kellerman listened, leaning forward, eyes sparkling. I love it, he said. That's exactly the kind of initiative we need. We'll fund it, allocate resources, and position it as part of our leadership development program. She felt a surge of excitement. And I'd like to audit existing contracts too. Review translations, terms, tone. So many of our agreements have subtle mistranslations that cost us time and money. He nodded. Consider it done. You'll have a direct line to legal and operations. Anything you need. He paused, gazing at her. Denise, today, the world saw you as a janitor. Yesterday, the world saw you as a polyglot. Starting now, I want the world to see you as a leader. Her breath caught in her throat, and a flush of warmth spread across her cheeks. She thought of the late nights studying under unforgiving lamps, the tears in bathroom stalls, the ache in her feet after long shifts. She thought of her daughter's smile at the end of every phone call, the promise she'd whispered to herself every day. Keep going. She straightened in her chair, resolve shining in her eyes. All right, she said, voice firm. Let's do it. He extended his hand, and when she took it, it felt like more than agreement. It felt like destiny. They shook, and the office seemed to shimmer around them, as if acknowledging a shift in the air. Outside the window, the city continued its pulse, unaware of the moment that had just reshaped one woman's life, and perhaps the future of a company. Denise gathered her notebook and sipped the rest of her coffee. For the first time, the daylight in this office felt like sunlight, not spotlight. She left the mug on his desk, rose, and turned toward the door. Kellerman stood too, watching her with a look of genuine admiration. As she stepped into the hallway, her mop bucket gone, and her path clearing toward new challenges, Denise felt the weight of her past lift. She walked with purpose, every step echoing with the promise of a role she had earned, one that would forever blur the line between cleaning carts and leading conferences. The morning sunlight filtered through the glass atrium as Denise Atwater stepped into the newly christened Atwater Room. The plaque on the door, sleek brushed steel letters spelling out Voice Inside Internal Talent Accelerator, caught the light like a promise. A small gathering of colleagues, interns, and senior leaders had assembled for the launch of the program she and Jonathan Kellerman had pioneered. As she set down her coffee cup, she watched faces light up with curiosity and anticipation. This was more than a ribbon cutting. It felt like the opening of a door inside every person in the room. Denise cleared her throat, feeling the familiar flutter of nerves, not from imposter syndrome, but from excitement. She remembered the days when her own nameplate had been a simple badge clipped to her uniform. Now her name adorned a room dedicated to uncovering hidden potential. She offered a warm smile and greeted each attendee by name, slipping effortlessly between English, Spanish, and French, as custom welcome messages scrolled across the smartboard behind her. The multilingual greeting set the tone, diversity of voice, unity of purpose. Welcome to Voice Inside, she began, her voice steady and inviting. This program isn't about polishing resumes or filling seats. It's about recognizing brilliance where it already exists. She watched as nods rippled through the crowd. Young staffers who had once hovered in corners, custodial team members, in casual coveralls, receptionists pushing carts of brochures. They leaned forward, sensing that this was a space created for them. Over the next hour, Denise guided the group through the program's first pilot workshop. She invited participants to share their unique skills, a bilingual forklift operator who'd volunteered to interpret for shipment crews, an IT specialist who composed music in her spare time, a receptionist who spoke 3 dialects of Arabic. Each story reinforced her message: talent cannot be measured by a job title. Laughter mingled with applause as individuals realized their strengths had been overlooked simply because of their roles. Later that afternoon, Denise and Kellerman huddled in his office to review initial feedback. Charts on the screen showed a flurry of applications from every department: facilities, security, cafeteria, mailroom, all eager to join leadership shadowing sessions and language labs. Kellerman leaned back, eyes twinkling. "Denise, I've never seen such engagement across so many levels," he said. "You've tapped into something powerful here." Denise felt a surge of pride tempered by humility. She knew that this was only the beginning. 2 weeks later, Denise found herself standing backstage at the annual Logistics Leadership Summit in Cincinnati. The auditorium's velvet curtains framed a sea of business suits and lanyards, each attendee representing a corner of the supply chain world. As the MC introduced her, Denise Atwater, cultural liaison and co-creator of Halberg International's Voice Inside, she took a steadying breath. The lights dimmed and the projector clicked to life. She began with the story that had brought her here: the janitor who spoke 9 languages, the CEO who finally saw her. But she didn't dwell on herself. Instead, she painted vivid images of unseen heroes, custodians guiding VIP guests, and native tongues warehouse workers who saved shipments by decoding foreign labels, cafeteria staff who diffused tense negotiations over lunch trays. She spoke with the cadence of someone who had lived both sides of the divide: the overlooked and the celebrated. "Never assume worth by a uniform," she told the audience, her voice echoing across the vast stage. "Talent has no dress code." Her words hung in the air like a challenge. She shared data from Voice Inside's pilot: cross-departmental retention had improved by 15%, employee satisfaction was at an all-time high, and critical language gaps had been closed in record time. But more than numbers, she shared testimonials, stories of people who had reclaimed their confidence and in turn lifted the whole organization. As she concluded, the auditorium erupted into applause that felt less like polite courtesy and more like collective realization. Executives rose to their feet, not to honor a keynote speaker, but to acknowledge a fundamental shift in thinking. Denise felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, not from emotion for herself, but from the knowledge that she had turned her own struggle into a movement. Backstage, attendees approached her with hushed praise. One young woman, a shipping clerk who'd taught herself Japanese shyly, asked how she could join Voice Inside's leadership circles. A senior VP of operations confessed that he'd dismissed non-executive staff too many times and thanked Denise for opening his eyes. Each interaction reaffirmed that her story was no longer hers alone. It belonged to everyone who had ever felt invisible. The next morning, Denise returned to Fort Worth and carried the summit's energy into the office. She found Jonathan Kellerman in the lobby where he was greeting a delegation from Tokyo. Denise slipped beside him, offering a quick translation of a polite bow into conversational Japanese, an impromptu act that drew smiles from both visitors and staff. Kellerman caught her eye and gave a subtle thumbs up. No one needed to speak. They shared the unspoken confidence that the company had changed. Over the following weeks, Voice Inside expanded its offerings, reverse mentoring sessions pairing executives with frontline staff, cultural immersion days where custodians led workshops on their native customs, and an internal fellowship for non-traditional leaders to pitch innovation projects directly to the board. Denise found herself juggling spreadsheets one moment, coaching an intern the next, and drafting summit proposals by the afternoon. The mop and cart were distant memories. Her tools were now plans and presentations, her stage any conference room where ideas could flourish. But every afternoon she made a point to walk the lobby halls. She greeted the cleaning crew by name, paused to chat with security staff members, and slipped her earbud in to teach Spanish greetings to the receptionist. She didn't want to forget where she came from or the feeling of being unseen. The echoes of her own journey reminded her why Voice Inside mattered to ensure no one else felt hidden. One Friday evening, as she tidied her desk, a handwritten note slid under her door caught her attention. In neat script it read, "Thank you for seeing me." No signature, but Denise knew exactly where it came from, a night shift custodian who'd once felt invisible. She held the note to her chest, eyes glistening, and whispered, "We see you." That moment crystallized everything: the program, the summit, the countless transformations unfolding across the building. Legacy wasn't about plaques or speeches. It was about the ripple of recognition, the spark of confidence ignited in someone who thought no one was watching. Months later, as she walked through the lobby under the soft glow of evening lights, Denise noticed a line of employees staffed from every department waiting to shake her hand or share a quick thanks. They weren't high-powered executives, they were line workers. Maintenance crew administrative assistants, all united by the belief that their talents mattered. She greeted each person asking about their latest language wins, their mentorship pairings, their project pitches. Every story added another brushstroke to the living tapestry of change. In that moment, Denise understood that legacy wasn't a destination. It was a constantly evolving narrative written in thousands of small moments of visibility and value. And as she stepped into the elevator heading home after another day of meaningful work, she carried the resonance of every unseen voice now heard and every promise of brilliance yet to be discovered.